Hi everyone, this is This Week in Investing and Finance, episode 7. I'm your host, Martin Shkreli. So happy to be here with you. This is now the 7th week that we've done this podcast, so I appreciate all the questions that come in and all the people that watch. It's really great. It's my pleasure to give you some little bit of my knowledge, or if you can call it wisdom in the markets. So what happened with the markets? Well, let's see. It was a decent week for everyone. There's some funky things that stood out to me. Bitcoin is on a tear, and we'll talk all about Bitcoin in a second. Crude is not. And biopharma closed out a pretty rough month. The average biotech pharma stock I look at was down 4% or so, which is kind of a lot. And so a lot of people who had long-only exposure to biotech kind of had a really bad month, despite the markets were kind of boring. But year to date, at least, biotech is kind of whatever. It's still sort of in line with the markets. Internet stocks and software stocks, especially, just continue to, take over the world, to paraphrase Andreessen Horowitz. So, really amazing things happening there and continue to happen. So, really unbelievable. I've been talking that week after week, and whether it's stocks like Viva or Workday or all of them, sort of continue to do amazing. So anyway, I've been looking at that space really closely, including my own new software company, trying to get some exposure to all this. So we have to talk about Bitcoin, because everyone asks me every damn week, and it's been a long time coming, and I spent a good amount of time reading about Bitcoin, including over the last few weeks and months, secretly. I even have a Bitcoin address, which I'll need to invest and trade Bitcoin, right? So this isn't too much of a deep dive, so it's not the kind of thing where I'm going to teach you what Bitcoin is and stuff like that. There are a million places that you can do that. That's not my job. My job is I'm an investor, and this is about a show about investing. So I'm going to give you some forecasts and an opinion. But if you want to learn the nitty-gritty of Bitcoin, there's a zillion places to do that. I even have some books in the what I'm reading section that comes later. But some really kind of just definition things. Bitcoin, all might abbreviated BTC here and there, is a currency. And uses a technology called blockchain. And that's, I think, all you need to know more or less as a speculator. I don't think you need to know how it works. I'm not sure that matters that much. And the other sort of semantic thing I want to explain is that you can't invest in Bitcoin. Anybody who says that they're investing in Bitcoin it's sort of misappropriating the word. You speculate on currency. You speculate on its exchange ratio with other currencies. You don't really, in other assets, you don't invest. Investing connotes some kind of exchange for rights, particularly usually in equity. You're not getting any equity in Bitcoin when you buy Bitcoin. You're speculating that the value of Bitcoin will go up. Bitcoin doesn't make anything, just like the euro and dollar don't make anything. When you invest in Apple, you're buying a stake of the company, and the company is making electronics goods. Bitcoin is not an investment. It's a speculative currency. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, and you'll see that I'm actually concluded I'm rather bullish on Bitcoin, and that I've started buying some Bitcoin. But it's really important to distinguish the two, because commodities and currencies are not investments. They can't be thought of as investments, and I think it's important to sort of consider that. So anytime you hear somebody, I invest in cryptocurrency or something, you can tell them that they're not investing in anything. They're guessing and speculating like the rest of us. So why Bitcoin? Again, I'm not going to go through the technological parts of Bitcoin, but I will tell you that one of the things that amazed me about Bitcoin is the speed at which you can do a transaction. And if you have ever done a wire transaction or done a transaction with some kind of foreign bank, I would tell you that it is almost impossible to do that quickly. There is literally no way to send $1 million around the country quickly. And in Bitcoin, you can do that very quickly. And so the question does become, will banks catch up? And so why would you want to send $1 million very quickly? Well, I remember doing some transactions where I was going to buy, pharmaceuticals, a large amount of pharmaceutical products and things like that. And it really would be nice to be able to confirm the acquisition of a deal, the closing of a deal quickly. I just want to go back real quick. Somebody's talking about speculating versus investing in the chat. When you invest, usually you're providing capital to something that would otherwise not have your capital without your investment. That's not the case in currencies and commodities. The amount of gold that there is the amount of gold that there is. You're speculating on the base value of it. The same thing applies to a euro. When you buy euros, you're not giving money to the European governments. You're just speculating. So let's not be silly about what does it mean to invest. Again, one shouldn't view it pejoratively, because you're investing. It's not something that's necessarily better or worse than speculating or trading, as another word for speculating. It's just that you're in the secondary market as opposed to the primary market. And you could be a speculator on the price of Apple without giving Apple money. When you trade Apple stock, you're not giving them any capital, but you are serving sort of you're sort of serving as liquidity for primary investors in the secondary market, as they say. So there's no such market in Bitcoin. You're just a speculator in all scenarios. So something to sort of keep in mind. All right, so anyway, back to the speed. It is really impressive. I saw somebody mention Swift. If you've ever tried to transfer large amounts of money quickly, it is really a nightmare. The amount of fraud prevention and other things the banks go through because they have to stand on both sides of the transaction is really ugly. And I'm not sure that there's ever going to be a better sort of way to do it than Bitcoin. And maybe it's Ethereum or whatever, but the point is that it's a really impressive technology if you want to get a lot of money around the world very quickly, which I don't know of any other way to do that. And I've done some very large transactions, and this would be a very good solution for a number of situations. The anonymity sort of cuts both ways. The benefit of the anonymity is that nobody can control your data other than you, which is great if you're doing something illegal, which is obviously of worry to a lot of people. At the same end, even if you're not doing something illegal, hopefully you're not, there's no ability for a bank staff, which you don't want to see your transactions, clearly, but there's no ability for even the government to see your transactions, which again, you'd ordinarily would think is that well, that's a great thing. But again, if it makes governments nervous to the extent that they might legislate kind of against you, or against the technology, that is something that you have to sort of think about. But the anonymity is sort of a plus. Again, I see it as a double-edged sword. The decentralization, Bitcoin doesn't have any sort of entity that exists. It's a peer-to-peer network. Again, if you want to learn more about the details of how it works, you're welcome to do that, but there's no central clearing bank. There's no central bank of any kind. All of the monetary dynamics are predetermined. And that's great because the fees are exceptionally low. I will talk about fees in a second because Coinbase's fee is 4%, so that's not exactly low. That's vastly more than almost any other monetary system. So we'll sort of talk about that, but it really does keep a lot of the banks honest, which I think is great. And it doesn't mean that lending can't exist. In fact, lending will move to hedge funds and specialty lenders who are probably better equipped to do that lending anyway. So it's a really, really interesting dynamic that will sort of allow for a better situation. But again, will governments sort of start to clamp down on it, or will they embrace it is an enormous question that'll sort of be need to be talked about. So how do we value Bitcoin? And I think if you guys have followed Bitcoin for a while, none of this is too innovative. But one of the ways when I sat down to do it, is I thought about GDP to the monetary base, which can be measured as M0, M1, or M2. It's one of the first things you learn in economics. And so the amount of transactions that occur in a country, in a time, in a period, is sort of basically GDP. Now, this doesn't include assets, like bonds, the value of bonds, value of stocks, etc. That number would be larger. But the monetary base in the U.S. is something like 4 to 5 billion, and the GDP is something like 17 billion. So the ratio is about 4.8x. And for euro, again, I calculated it quickly, but it was around 1.2x, and then we'll do gold in a minute. And so if you use money velocity, which is sort of what the ratio is called, to back into the value of Bitcoin, this is sort of interesting. So the whole idea is that you can calculate both the monetary base and the GDP of Bitcoin easily. So the concept of GDP is all the transactions, and the monetary base is the value of all outstanding Bitcoins. And so if you do that, you can start to sort of think about, well, forecasting, for instance, how many transactions will take place, and then you can back into the monetary base and then divide by 21 million, which is the amount of Bitcoins that exist. You start to get a value that's very attractive. You can transactions are growing 40% year over year. So if you just strip out the fact that the values are rising much faster than that, then you can sort of just strip that out to transactions. And I think transactions will grow at 40% year over year for a while. They've really started to become somewhat stable. But in any event, the point is that you can reverse engineer a price for Bitcoin. And if you do that, the prices are rather favorable. Gold is often, people look at Bitcoin and gold as similar, and they are quite similar. And the value traded of gold in a given year in the futures contracts market is about $36 trillion, which is an enormous number. But all the gold in the world is worth about $8 trillion. And you have that magical ratio of around 4.7x, which is sort of mysteriously interesting. So if you look at the 2016 notional traded value of Bitcoin, the last 30 days run rate is about 200 billion. And if you divide that by 5, that sort of ratio, aggregate Bitcoin should be worth about $40 billion, which it roughly is, which is kind of amazing if you think about it, that it reaches that parity. Now, the whole point of the markets, though, is that we discount the future. And what's interesting here is that you have likely increasing Bitcoin transactions for some time. In fact, I think that we'll go from 200 billion to $1 trillion in notional traded value of Bitcoin very easily. And if we do that and the ratio stays the same, Bitcoin will be worth $10,000 a Bitcoin. And I think that it wouldn't be hard for it to hit that or something much higher. The whole point is that that Bitcoin is extremely useful. And a lot of people, I see some silly questions about intrinsic value. No currency has intrinsic value. That's the important thing to understand about fiat. The only commodities that have intrinsic value are really oil. Gold has no intrinsic value. I think most people agree on that. It's not particularly useful. It has some industrial uses, but they are far, 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 far less than really their value that's priced into the metal. So currencies in general don't have intrinsic value. They're not backed by anything. We used to have something called the gold standard, which is, again, a little laughable because if you back a currency with something that's also has no intrinsic value, you really are back in the place you were. And money by its nature has no value other than its a replacement for work that you can barter for work. And if you guys told me right now that, hey, Martin, I'll send you 10 Bitcoins if you looked at my portfolio and gave me some advice, I'd probably do it. But for half an hour or an hour or so. But the point is that if you told me that you'd ask me to do it for 1 Bitcoin, I might do it just because Bitcoin are interesting me and I want more Bitcoin. But if you said half a Bitcoin or a tenth of a Bitcoin, I'd say that's not worth the barter. And that's the nature of currencies, that it's a barter tool, and that that's sort of the unseen hand that changes the value of currencies. And Bitcoin, the really important thing here is that it's extremely useful, and that at the end of the day, people like Bitcoin because of that. It's not sort of any. It really is a sort of progression of the way we look at money. Again, whether you want to be sort of wax poetic about it and talk about it as in terms of the same impact the internet's going to have, the internet had, and so forth. I'm not a poet, but it certainly, if you look into the details of it, there is a remarkable benefit from Bitcoin that can't really be rivaled easily. And I would suspect that it's going to be here to stay, and that the more transactions that take place with Bitcoin, the more likely we'll value it at that sort of 4 to 5x ratio, and the more valuable Bitcoin will be. So whether the alternative currencies or coins will show up and do well, nobody knows. Certainly there's no reason why we can't have 3 or 4 of these types of coins. But in any event, I do think it's early days for Bitcoin, and that we could easily see the price go up several fold. So I wish I could buy Bitcoin without a 4% fee. That's a really nasty fee. So I'm going to look for a vendor that'll let me do that. If you guys know of any, feel free to email me at martin@thoughtpatrol.com. I know that there's a lot of vendors out there, but a reliable vendor would be welcome. So I'm bullish on Bitcoin. People have sent me about $20-$30 of Bitcoin. Thank you, all you great strangers. But I'd like to make a real investment in Bitcoin. So what will happen with Bitcoin? Well, I think that J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, if you look really long term, I think these companies may have a hard time. You can strip out the advisory business. If you look at Goldman and Morgan Stanley, those banks don't really have deposits, and their deposit is their book value. Whereas J.P. Morgan, Bank of America have customer deposits, and they lend those customer deposits. I could see there be specific mortgage lenders that sort of spring up, that if you wanted to buy a house with Bitcoin, you could do it with a dedicated mortgage lender. But it could be the kind of thing that you can short. Did I just say investment? Of course, I was speculating. Of course, I'd be speculating, not investing. But that's a slip of the tongue. Anyway, the investment banks are different from the full-line banks in that they don't have deposits. So you can actually hedge that out pretty well. And if you wanted to make a really interesting trade, if you're at a top hedge fund and you had to trade billions of dollars, you could do a really fun trade here, shorting J.P. Morgan and Bank of America and going long the traditional investment banks, not the commercial banks, and see what happens. PayPal was supposed to be Bitcoin before Bitcoin happened, and they sort of failed in their goal to do that. So we'll have to see how PayPal kind of thinks about how to live in this world. It may help them, it may hurt them, but it's something that's, I think, pretty interesting. So in general, I really like the idea of Bitcoin. I've enjoyed using it thus far. I would trust a very large transaction in Bitcoin. Like most trades that one makes, you shouldn't have too much Bitcoin. I might put 1% or 0.5% of my funds in Bitcoin, but you should never have 5 or 10% of your funds, and usually in anything, unless you're really sure. And something like Bitcoin, I would sort of be careful about. The reason is good portfolio management. Even if you're right about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin goes from, say, I don't know, $2,000 of Bitcoin to $20,000 of Bitcoin, which I think is possible. I'm not sure how likely it is, but it's certainly in the realm of likelihood it's worth talking about. That's a 10x return. So if you turn 1% of your capital into 10% of your capital, you make 10%, which is a great, healthy, long-term return. All you need to do is one of those a year, and you never have to trade again, and 99% of your money is in cash. Of course, it's hard to find one 10-bagger a year, but if you find one 10-bagger, say, every other year, every 3 years, and the rest of your portfolio makes 3% or 4% or 5%, you can actually have it such that you have the bulk of your assets in cash waiting for a downturn, And this is a method of investing that Seth Klarman and other great investors use, which is to be cash rich. Um, and, and that's a really important sort of concept in investing, to me at least. All right, so what about threats? Obviously, we talked about Ethereum briefly in terms of an alternative coins. If there's a really dynamite alternative coin, then you could certainly see some threats. But I think Bitcoin is enough of a sea change that I'm not sure that people really want alternative coins, and there's a reason that Bitcoin is the most popular, and it'll probably stay that way. Just as sort of the way I look at disruption and kind of the way disruptive forces work. I don't think there's enough from the other currencies. I think Bitcoin will be the gold standard for some time. Legislation is pretty scary. Obviously, to a certain extent, one can't avoid Bitcoin, but I'm kind of reminded of the gambling in the U.S. Statutes. There's some serious. There was some thought to have online gambling in the U.S. and it was banned. And one thought, well, how do you stop that? And there are ways to stop it. So if you don't believe me, try to play a hand of poker online right now in the U.S. It's almost impossible. So Bitcoin could get stamped out by legislation, and obviously the banks have very large lobbying interests and could attempt to do so, whereas Bitcoin has no such lobbying interest. So it's one thing to keep in mind, and again, this is one of the things that it makes sense to sort of keep your position sizes small. Again, the Coinbase transaction fee was weird. I know these guys are raising money. They're being valued around $1 billion. It's pretty amazing. They're one of the trusted Bitcoin traders. That's a great business model if you can keep your fees at 4%. Hopefully those fees will go down, but pretty difficult fee basis right there. Anyway, I'm bullish on Bitcoin. I'm probably going to have a small position in it at some point soon. So May is over. Like I said, for a lot of healthcare investors, it was a really tough month. There's some interesting moves. This company, Purus, was suggested to me a while back by some folks in the stream. Mankind is up a bunch. Ampio is up a bunch. These are kind of garbage companies. Abivax is a company I'm studying carefully in France that looks like it has some promising stuff. I don't know what's going on with Kilian and Calithera. We know what happened with Sangamo. I bought some stock after the deal. Immunomedics increasingly seems like a real deal. There's a couple of spec pharma companies like Insys and Valiant that are making a comeback. I don't know what's going on with Corcept. We saw the news on Aerie. I'm not sure what's going on with TG Therapeutics. Novavax, kind of a dead company. Alnylam, of course, we know was up on the Ionis data, and Regeneron, of course, is up because I'm long it. Of course, I'm kidding about that. But again, I like to look at these lists every month and say, why wasn't I long some of these? Why wasn't I in Sangamo before they did their Pfizer deal? Why didn't I never hear of Abivax until the stock doubled? Should I be in one of these crappy stocks? One of these 4 kind of never do well companies? Should I time the spec pharma comeback? Probably not on that one. But Immunomedics seemed like I could have been in that, and Alnylam certainly seemed like I could have been in that. But I got one of these, so I'm somewhat happy. You can't get them all, obviously, or you'd be the greatest trader ever. But these are the best biopharma stocks for May. The worst, Neurotrope, I got some of that short through a partner of mine. We're very happy that we got that. Vital I made a fortune on years ago, but I wasn't shorted recently. I don't know what's going on with Eaglet. I bought a little bit of Horizon when it dipped. I'm not sure what's going on with Newlink or AMAG. ITSI is a sort of garbage company that I'm sort of happy they're failing. Of course, I'm short Acadia, so that got one of those. And if you could buy one stock on the long list and be short one stock on the short list every month, you probably make a lot of money. So I'm very happy that I caught Acadia. Imprimis is a pretty garbage company. Alexion, I was long a little bit of this going in, but I sort of tripled my position so that I think my average is almost break even, not quite. So I'm pretty happy that I got the opportunity to buy Alexion at these prices. I'm not sure what's going on with Alder or Acceleron. Sun and Lannett are down because generic companies are having a really tough go of things lately. Just look at Teva's stock price. And I'm not sure what's going on with Opco or Zencor, Epizyme, Dermira, Concert, or, of course, Medicines Company. Let's see, your boy is short. So I got two of the top sort of 20 or so stocks. I got 20 here, and I didn't plan on that. Great. So anyway, it was nice results for me in May. Hopefully, June is as exciting. So here are some of my current opinions. I'm starting to look at Akayojan as along, Novelion, and I'll talk about Omeros, and I bought another one, PTC. What's overvalued? Zyopharma looks like it could be overvalued. Intrexon looks like it could be overvalued. It's always thought to be overvalued. I'm looking at a couple more of these. I made a UNH model. I made a Medtronic model. GW is going to definitely be interesting to me. So we got some new stuff on the table to look at for Athena as well. Ya boy. Yeah, I think it's ya boy. Thank you very much for correcting it. Ya boy is short. Ya boy is short. Ya boy is long. I appreciate the correction there, Poppy. All right, here's the portfolio. Had a very good week. Up almost 2% for the year. This is despite not having invested for most of the year. So if you grow the exposure and the other things, I think I'm beating the market roughly. I added 2 longs. I'm probably going to short biotech index because I really don't like being long, and you can see I'm starting to get kind of long biased, and I'd much rather not be long or exposed to the market. This isn't much exposure, but as I creep up in the gross from 50 to maybe 60 or 70, I want to add some shorts. And if I can't find shorts, what I like to do is just hedge by shorting biotech. So that's sort of the plan here. Again, up 64 bips for the week, pretty nice. 2% for the year. Again, the markets are still up quite a bit, 9% and 17% for NASDAQ. But again, I've been mostly in cash. So if you adjust that, you can kind of think about that being a good return. But again, for me, I like to focus on private equity. My startups, Turing and Godel are the way I manage most of my money. And I need to hold cash in case those businesses need more money or an opportunity comes up. So in any event, but the markets, if there's something really interesting, I like to move, and I'm increasing my portfolio due to this series. So I usually have even less gross exposure. So just something to keep in mind. A couple of interesting things. There's this ASCO meeting that I highlighted last week. The Loxo data look great. I chickened out. I couldn't really pull the trigger. I'm sure the stock will be up on Monday. If it's not up too much, I might buy some. But good news for Loxo out of Chicago. Again, I was too chicken, which I was talking to a friend about this. The stock's $45, and everyone's always disappointed when before flipping a coin and it comes out heads. You say, I didn't bet on heads. I should have bet on heads. I'm such an idiot. But the funny thing is, let's say the payout is $90, so it goes from 45 to 90 if you got it right. But let's say you flipped it and it hits on heads and the stock goes from 45 to 55. Well, it's a lot better bet to buy it at 55, knowing that it landed heads and it stopped rolling and it's right there and it's heads. That's a much better bet than guessing at $45, and you might lose all of it if it lands on tails. So it landed on heads, and it's $55. I'm going to buy it. Again, that math isn't exactly normal for the situation, but it's a good analogy, I think. Roche put out this oak data, which was kind of interesting to me, that they showed that if you keep going with PD-1 suppression, you can get some better results in cancers, which I thought was kind of neat news out of ASCO. The Bristol-Myers data for LAG-3 was not good. I don't know why people thought it was good, but I was not impressed at all, and this is a problem for Bristol-Myers. Some people think it's good. I'm long, so I hope, I hope that people sort of perceive it that way. But I wasn't overly impressed with it at all. And I'm also long Regeneron. Regeneron seems like they're number 2 in the lag race, which is kind of neat. So I'm kind of, and they also have a phase 3 for PD-1. So I don't have any of that stuff in my Regeneron model. So maybe Regeneron has some more upside. I'm sure all of you saw Alexion hired some people for the roles that they fired everyone for. So I don't know what people thought, that because Alexion fired 4 or 5 of their senior people, that they weren't going to hire 4 or 5 more senior people. So as predicted, the CEO, who comes from Baxalta, just hired his old executive team from Baxalta, which is great. Baxalta had a really good outcome. So I'm really excited about Alexion. There was this company called Protagonist, which had this really nice deal, which came kind of out of nowhere. which put Protagonist a little bit on the map. And the New England Journal published this minocycline study in multiple sclerosis, which failed. Again, anytime you take this really old drug, minocycline is an antibiotic, in case you didn't know, should have no impact in multiple sclerosis, which is not an infectious disease. But it was done by academics. Again, no drug company in their right mind would pay to do a minocycline study. It was interesting to sort of see that that study failed, but even the New England Journal was trying to sort of couch it as a positive study, which it was not. But I thought that was an interesting clinical trial. In tech, not a whole lot going on there that I can talk about that is different from what you could read just reading the Wall Street Journal. But there's an instant recharging technology, which would be really neat for phones or for cars, such that you could just charge your, but you'd have to pay extra, of course, for electricity, but you could completely recharge your phone or device, car even, immediately, like a gas tank almost, without recharging over time, which is really cool. Hopefully that technology gets commercialized someday. Ambrosia is a parabiosis startup. Parabiosis is where you take the blood or the organs of a younger organism and transfer them to that of an older organism, hoping that the youth generative properties of the younger organism will transfer over. And we've seen parabiosis successful in mice. In fact, I hired a great PhD researcher a while back who did a bunch of parabiosis papers, including one in Nature at UC Berkeley. And anyway, this company called Ambrosia is selling young blood, literally young blood, to older people, presumably, who want to buy this blood for $8,000. And then you can get it infused through IV. So if any of you are interested, go look up Ambrosia. But I do think that parabiosis is real. I know there's Peter Thiel and a number of other startups thinking about it. But pretty amazing technology there and kind of interesting. Chrome, the Google browser, which brought us V8 and really revolutionized the web, with which a lot of people don't understand exactly what it did. They're actually deprecating a WebAssembly competitor, and they are going with WebAssembly, which is pretty interesting news for people in technology and software. Chrome really did change the game for sort of moving into software as a service and allowing the browser to have enough horsepower for real apps. So, I think that'll continue, and the idea of WebAssembly being kind of that last mile, if you will, that we need to traverse to have true web native operating system access with respect to the processor, at least. WebAssembly is finally won over, I guess, the people at Google. But they've been part of both. They've had their hands in WebAssembly as well. Anyway, Toyota had a flying car that crashed, but again, it is interesting to see all these companies really excited about flying cars. Between that and autonomous vehicles and blockchain, there's plenty for tech investors to be interested in for the next 50 or 100 years. So, it'll be interesting. Speaking of cars, we're going to go into a Tesla deep dive, or semi-deep dive. So I appreciate everybody paying attention to this, but I hear every day for the last 6 months that Tesla's this great short, and a bunch of you asked by email for me to look at Tesla. And viscerally, of course, I sit there and say, oh yeah, that sounds like a great short, they're losing money, etc. But after doing some homework, I will tell you that Tesla is not a short, at least from what I can see. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But, it does remind me of one of the concepts I talk about in my speaking tour, which is the nature of intuition betraying logic. And your intuition is that, Tesla has to be this great short because of their negative 50% margins, their gigantic debt load, et cetera, et cetera. And all that is very intuitive. GM can just do whatever they're doing, etc. But none of that is logical. None of that really is part of hardcore reasoning. And I've learned over many, many years of self-deprecation and flagellation that one has to be really sober and think really carefully when thinking about investments. And it's hard to do. We get emotional. Maybe some of us don't want Elon Musk to win. We would love to see the smirk on his face wiped off. But reality is different. And so I'm going to pull up my model here for Tesla, and we're going to talk about it. But some of the quick takeaways is that I think the 500,000 units of Model 3 will more or less sell out immediately, though the company will be capacity constrained. What I think the market doesn't understand sort of 2 or 3 big things here, which is that I think Tesla could easily do 1 million annual units, which is double that of what they're trying to do for 2018, which is right around the corner. And I think what people don't understand is that is such a small market share of auto shipments that I'm very surprised that the market doesn't understand this. It's a great car. People love the car. If you ever talk to anybody who has a Tesla, they rant and rave about it. It really transcends what it means to own a car. And I think that ultimately the market's forgetting the lesson of Apple, which is that when you have a product that people love and they think about and they brand differently, as Buffett told a good friend of mine, he said, I like products that people think about with a different part of their brain. This is not a well-known Buffett saying, but he told a friend of mine who's one of the senior people at one of his companies, one of the big Buffett, I think Coca-Cola type of investment Buffett has. And if you think about Tesla, that is really the way people think about the car, is that it's a totally different part of their brain that you stop thinking about, the cost of the product and et cetera, and you really just say, I love this thing. And great design, in essence, is sort of part of the brand. And if you think about the iPhone or whatever else, great design comes with a premium. And great design means that a company like Tesla can go from 0% to 5 or 10% of the global car business, has plenty of room for another player. And Tesla has the capital. They've raised billions of dollars in the snap of a finger, calling Goldman or Morgan Stanley. And they seem to like they'll start to have the capacity. Tesla's starting to actually make their promises, which for a while they didn't. So they're hitting their production targets. They're small targets, but they're hitting them. And I actually think they will be able to make the Model 3 in the scale that they're saying they will. And then Toyota has 20% plus gross margin, so I don't see why Tesla can't. So I feel pretty good about Tesla. Let's go through the numbers. So here is the model. With 1 million annual shipments, the stock is fairly valued. And if you look at the auto industry, just the biggest 3 players, Ford, GM, Toyota, are doing 22 million annual shipments. And I'm not including an enormous number of other players like Hyundai or Daimler or several other big makers. So you're really talking about probably 3% of global auto share. So if you're talking about 3%, can the best product that's universally lauded get to 3% market share? I think that's going to be a cakewalk. I have 25% automotive GMs. You might call that kind of aggressive, but I would say that if you think about the iPhone and other sort of must-have products, margins often are much higher than anyone gives them credit for. So I think Tesla could actually way outdo these numbers. I'm not going to go long. I have a lot of work to do. I'm not an auto analyst. I have not studied autos my entire life, but I am. A bunch of people did ask, and I thought I might kind of glance at it. And I expected some kind of disaster situation, but as I really sat there and thought about kind of what's going to happen with this company, I feel much better about it. And obviously, Elon has a lot of good stuff cooking in his head. How much of that's going to trickle down to Tesla shareholders, I'm not so sure, but I expect Tesla and SpaceX will merge, and we'll get more bites at the Elon apple. So again, I still have to think about what'll happen, but I have no assumption, no problem assuming that Tesla can get more than 1 million shipments a year. So I think that you could see the numbers increase here. The stock could get higher. I only regret not buying it when it was much lower. So anyway, there's some thoughts on Tesla. I hope some of you enjoy that. Let's continue here. All right, got some Q&A. And then I'm going to go watch the NBA game. These are some of the dumber questions I got, but there's no such thing as dumb questions, just dumb people. What's the best way to learn? Blake asks. Well, Blake, I don't know. There's a lot written on this. It's maybe not that stupid of a question, but I have. I don't have too many thoughts on this that nobody else has, and I think most of the people who ask questions like this are looking for the easy way out. Probably the best way to learn is just to read all day, and you're probably asking because you want some magic formula that'll let you learn in half an hour. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. If you really want to learn a lot, you have to be sort of content, limit your social life, and just read all the things you can in life, and you'll learn a lot that way. But if you sleep 12 hours a day and party when you're not at work, and you don't learn much when you're at work, you won't learn anything. And it depends on what your life goal is. But I think that's sort of my advice, and I'm not sure it'll be too useful for you. Please give me advice. I think it was a high school student. Calum asks on my ridiculously personal situation. Oh, poor Calum. I cannot give you advice on your personal situation. I don't care about you and your situation, and I really, couldn't care less about what you do. And good luck. I would tell you if I cared, but I don't. Why do some companies have PEs of over 100 from KM? Well, this is something that I think is a pretty foolish question. PE is just a quotient. The price is the market cap, and the E is the net income. If a company has a arbitrarily low amount of net income, it doesn't mean that the quotient of PE is meaningful, right? So you could have a company like Tesla, they're worth $50 billion. If their earnings are zero, well, X divided by zero is infinity, or does not, or whatever, undefined. But you could also say that, okay, well, let's say they had $1 million of net income. It's not fair to say they have a 50,000 PE. Price to earnings ratio is kind of a meme that you should avoid. You shouldn't talk about price to earnings, and when you have to, you really want a normalized earnings yield. That's sort of the way you should think about it. A little more sophisticated. When I first started, people would talk about PEs on Wall Street, and I would soon learn that I felt bad for all these people that were looking at this stuff. I'm getting a question about why shipments is a relevant number for Tesla. Obviously, shipments is levered, is the equivalent of net income multiplied by ASP. So you can't forecast net income without forecasting shipments. So shipments is easy to understand when taken in the context of the rest of the auto industry. If the auto industry is selling 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 million cars a year and projecting that Tesla could do 1 million, that's a much easier analysis to do and say, well, that seems fair, as opposed to saying, oh, 10 billion in net income seems fair. Well, you have to sort of think about shipments as opposed to net income, which is arbitrary. So, anyway, no, it would be a 50,000 PE, Mr. Robot. If you had a $50 billion company and $1 million in net income, it would be 50,000 x PE. They did not pick me up off the street and name me Pharma Bro for nothing. I can do math. The zeros don't trick me. Stefan asks what my opinion of Bayer is. Too many stocks, not enough time. I'm not sure. Last time I looked at it, it looked fairly valued. Steve asked me what I think about for high frequency trading. I hope they make it illegal, but I don't really have too strong of an opinion. Gary asked about crude. I agree with Gary's thesis. He wrote this long thing about why crude's long. What do I know about commodities, though? I can't really tell you. Johannes and Rael asked me about Tesla, and I started to think about responding, and I said, gee, I think this is such a short, and then I said, you know what, let me go do some research. And so that's sort of the obvious sort of way to do that. Priceline, Peter, I could not tell you. Gilead, what would you do strategically if you're the CEO, asks Ty. Well, they became one of the world's biggest biotech pharma companies for a reason. They bought Pharmasset, they're patient. I don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're building their base business, so keep going. Chris asks about psilocybin. For depression, I think ketamine's better. Aaron asked a really fun and interesting question. Said, who's number one for the CEO that should focus on shareholders, bondholders, employees, or customers? I really don't know. If you focus too much on your customers, you probably are going to disappoint your shareholders. If you focus too much on your employees, you're probably going to disappoint both your shareholders and your customers. I think you have to balance all your stakeholders fairly, which is very difficult because all of them are super demanding, as they should be. Again, asks a theoretical, philosophical question: what's more important, R&D or sales and marketing? Again, it's sort of one of these questions that doesn't have an answer. I love questions that don't have answers because they frame analytically a framework to think about a way to see the present situation through different lenses. Dhruv asks about life extension. I don't think that drug companies will focus on it specifically, and they accomplish much the same by focusing on illnesses, late-stage life illnesses like cancer. So I don't know. There's no incentive right now, so I think they'll sort of avoid that. All right. A couple things I'm reading. I would read the Satoshi wrote under pseudonym. We think Satoshi's a pseudonym. The 9-page Bitcoin paper. I would read it. Everything makes sense after one page. There's a few books I've been reading about cryptocurrency or whatever you want to call it. And then I've been reading the J Compute Chem, or Journal of Computational Chemistry, which Wiley puts out, I think 4 times a year. And for fun, I'm reading this chess training pocketbook, which looks pretty good, from Lev Albert. For some reason, Lev Albert is this old chess player, and he's got some friend of his, I guess, who's helping him study chess. It's a little weird. I've probably a couple hundred chess books, and this is a very strange cover for a chess book. Anyway, that's about it for today. You can always email me at martin@thotpatrol.com. I have a Twitter account that's BLMBro. Don't tell anybody. Twitter doesn't like me. You can sign up if you like this series. I think you'll love Godel. Go to godel.systems. That's the URL. And sign up with your LinkedIn, and we'll approve you for that. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, so if you shoot me questions and things you want to go over, you would be more than welcome to. I try to answer emails as they come in, probably answer about 30% of them. So thank you so much for joining. I'm going to go watch the NBA Finals.